A black girl suffers racism and is humiliated. Everyone who was mocking her trembled with fear when they discovered who the girl's grandfather was. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel sparkled with the opulence characteristic of New York high society. Crystal chandeliers shed golden light on the elegantly dressed guests who moved gracefully to the soft sound of a string orchestra. The scent of expensive champagne and exclusive perfumes hung in the air, mingling with the buzz of animated conversations and restrained laughter. In the midst of this dazzling setting, Alana Johnson took a deep breath, her hands nervously tightening the strap of her handbag. She was standing at the entrance to the hall, a lone figure in a sea of unfamiliar faces. Her navy blue dress, although elegant, looked simple compared to the extravagant outfits around her. Alana knew she didn't belong in this world of wealth and privilege, but the invitation to play the piano at this gala party was an opportunity she couldn't refuse. With hesitant steps, Alana entered the hall. Immediately, she felt all eyes on her. Some were just curious, others clearly suspicious. She could hear the whispers, the low voices that questioned her presence there. Who is she? She must be one of the staff. No. Look at the invitation in her hand. But how could someone like her have been invited to this event? Alana swallowed, fighting the urge to turn around and run. She was the only black person in the hall, a fact that seemed to shout out to everyone present. Her musical talent had brought her there, but at that moment, she felt as if her skin was the only thing people saw. Determined not to let the discomfort overwhelm her, Alana lifted her chin and walked towards the grand piano in the center of the hall. It was a magnificent instrument, a shiny black Steinway that seemed to call out to her. As she approached, she felt a wave of calm envelop her. There, in front of the keyboard, she was in her element. As she prepared to play, Alana noticed a friendly face among the crowd. It was Braden Green, her friend and fellow musician. He gave her an encouraging smile and a slight nod. His presence there was a reminder that she wasn't completely alone. Alana closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music flow through her. Her fingers touched the keys gently, and the first notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune filled the air. The buzz of conversation gradually died down, and the eyes that had once judged her now turned to her with a mixture of surprise and admiration. Music was her language, her way of expressing herself when words failed. Every note she played was a declaration of her presence, of her value. For a few precious minutes, Alana forgot where she was and who was around her. She was just one with the music, her hands dancing over the keys with a grace and skill that spoke for itself. As the last note faded into the air, there was a moment of silence before the applause began. They were polite, but not enthusiastic. Alana opened her eyes and saw mixed expressions in the audience. Some seemed genuinely impressed, others maintained an air of studied indifference. As she stood up from the piano bench, Alana heard a nearby voice say, "Well, at least she can play. Maybe that's why they let her in." The comment, although not aimed directly at her, hit her like a slap. Alana felt the heat rise to her cheeks, a mixture of shame and anger threatening to overflow. She moved away from the piano, looking for a place where she could pull herself together. She found refuge in a quieter corner of the hall, near a window that offered a breathtaking view of the city. New York shone outside, a landscape of lights and promise. Alana wondered how many other people like her were out there, dreaming of opportunities that seemed so far away. "Don't let them shake you," said a soft voice next to her. Alana turned and saw Braden, who had approached silently. "You were amazing there." "Thank you," Alana replied, grateful for her friend's presence. "But sometimes I wonder if it's worth it, if they'll ever see me beyond my color." Braden placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "It's worth it, Alana. Every note you play is a victory. You're opening doors, even if you don't realize it." His words brought a slight smile to Alana's lips. She knew that Braden understood her struggle. Like her, he was a talented musician struggling to be recognized in a world that often saw them as intruders. The moment of calm was interrupted by a growing buzz in the hall. Alana and Braden turned to see what was happening. A tall, imposing man had entered, attracting everyone's attention. Even from a distance, Alana immediately recognized the figure of Charles Whitman, the tycoon whose influence extended throughout New York. "What's he doing here?" Braden murmured, surprised. "I thought he rarely showed up at events like this." Alana watched as Charles Whitman greeted the guests, his bearing commanding respect and attention. There was something familiar about his movements, the way he carried himself, that intrigued her. As she watched him, Alana noticed an elegant woman standing next to Charles. It was Maria Whitman, his wife, known for her philanthropic work. To Alana's surprise, Maria looked in her direction and smiled warmly. "I think Mrs. Whitman noticed you," Braden commented, a tone of admiration in his voice. Alana nodded, feeling a mixture of nervousness and curiosity. There was something in Maria Whitman's gaze that made her feel less alone in that hostile environment. As the evening progressed, Alana prepared for her next performance. Despite the stares and comments, she was determined to show her talent. As she made her way back to the piano, she didn't notice Charles Whitman's eyes following her, a glint of recognition and pride in his gaze. The gala party continued, a whirlwind of luxury and pretension. But for Alana Johnson, it was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge preconceptions, reveal long-buried secrets, and perhaps change the course of her life forever. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel buzzed with anticipation for the next performance. Alana Johnson, her heart racing, once again positioned herself in front of the magnificent grand piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys, ready to once again transform the instrument into an extension of her soul. This time, she chose a more challenging piece, Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto, No. 1. The first notes, powerful and intense, instantly silenced the side conversations. The music flowed through her, each chord a declaration of her presence, each pause a challenge to the prejudice that surrounded her. As she played, Alana felt eyes fixed on her, some admiring, others skeptical. However, she refused to let the tension in the room affect her performance. Her eyes closed, allowing the music to guide her, taking her away from the opulent hall and the people who judged her. Across the hall, Maria Whitman watched Alana with a mixture of admiration and concern. She recognized in the young pianist's face the same determination that she herself had had to cultivate years ago. Maria quietly approached her husband, Charles, and whispered, "She reminds me so much of myself when I was young." Charles nodded silently, his eyes never leaving Alana's figure at the piano. There was a glint of pride in his gaze, mixed with a deep sadness that few would notice. As Alana approached the climax of the piece, voices began to rise in the hall, trying to overpower the music. Mean comments and debauched laughter echoed, getting louder and louder. What audacity! Does she really think she can play Tchaikovsky? It must be some kind of sick joke. Who invited her? Someone should tell her to go back to the ghetto where she came from. Every word was like a stab in Alana's heart, but she refused to stop. Her fingers continued to dance over the keys, transforming her pain into powerful notes that echoed through the hall. Music became her armor, her battle cry against the injustice she faced. Braden, who was watching from a corner of the hall, clenched his fists in anger. He wanted to intervene, to defend his friend, but he knew that would only make matters worse for Alana. Instead, he concentrated on transmitting all his strength and support through his gaze, hoping that somehow she could feel his presence. Maria Whitman, no longer able to stand still in front of the scene, began to move towards the piano. Her normally serene face now displayed a fierce determination. Charles, sensing his wife's intention, made a subtle gesture to stop her. "Not yet, dear," he murmured. "Let Alana show what she's capable of." And Alana did. As the piece came to its triumphant end, she opened her eyes, staring directly at those who tried to diminish her. Her hands flew over the keys with a passion and precision that left even her staunchest critics momentarily speechless. The last notes resounded through the hall, powerful and undeniable. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then, like a wave breaking on the shore, the applause began. They were sparse at first, coming mainly from Braden and a few genuinely impressed guests, but they soon grew, spurred on by the undeniable display of talent they had just witnessed. Alana stood up, her legs trembling slightly. She bowed slightly, her face a mask of composure that hid the whirlwind of emotions inside. As she moved away from the piano, she could hear the whispers begin again, some complimentary, others still laced with venom. It was at that moment that Maria Whitman decided to act. With the grace of someone used to navigating the turbulent seas of high society, she approached Alana. "My dear," she said, her voice soft but firm enough to be heard by those around her, "your performance was simply extraordinary. You have a rare gift." Alana, surprised by the approach, stammered out a thank you. Maria smiled warmly and continued, "Come with me. There's something I'd like to show you." With one arm gently wrapped around Alana's, Maria guided her to a quieter corner of the room, away from prying eyes and sharp tongues. There, in front of a window that offered a breathtaking view of the city, Maria began to speak. "You know, Alana, I've been in your shoes too," she said, her voice laden with memories. "When I arrived in New York from Brazil, I faced similar looks to the ones you face today. People saw my dark skin and immediately made judgments." Alana looked at Maria with surprise. The elegant lady in front of her, with her fair skin and delicate features, didn't look like someone who had faced discrimination. Noticing Alana's gaze, Maria smiled. "Ah, yes, time and a few adaptations have softened my appearance, but the memory of pain, of isolation, never completely disappears." Maria then shared stories of her youth with Alana. She talked about the doors that closed in her face, about the mean comments whispered behind her back, about the loneliness of being the only different one in a sea of pale, prejudiced faces. "But do you know what saved me, Alana?" Maria asked, her eyes shining with a mixture of determination and tenderness. "It was my art. Just as you have your music, I had my painting. It was my voice when the world refused to listen to me." Alana listened, fascinated. Maria's every word was like a balm for her wounded heart, proof that she was not alone in her struggle. "The road is not easy," Maria continued. "There will be days when you want to give up, when the weight of looks and words seems unbearable. But promise me one thing, Alana, never let them silence your music, because it is through your music that you will change hearts and minds." Tears glistened in Alana's eyes, threatening to overflow. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice laced with emotion. I didn't know how much I needed to hear that." Maria smiled, gently squeezing Alana's hand. "We're stronger together, my dear. Never forget that." As the two women talked across the hall, Charles Whitman watched the scene with a mixture of pride and melancholy. His gaze alternated between Alana and Maria, as if he were seeing not only the present, but echoes of the past and glimpses of the future. The party continued around them, but at that moment, in that corner of the room, a deep connection had been formed. a bridge between generations, between shared experiences of struggle and resistance. And although Alana didn't know it yet, it was only the beginning of a journey that would change not only her life, but the lives of everyone around her. The buzz in the Plaza Hotel ballroom had reached a new level. The conversation between Alana Johnson and Maria Whitman had not gone unnoticed, and now all eyes were on the corner where the two women were talking intimately. The contrast between them was striking. Maria, with her refined elegance and years of social experience, and Alana, young and visibly out of place, but with an aura of undeniable talent. Charles Whitman watched the scene with a mixture of pride and apprehension. He knew that the moment he had feared and longed for was about to arrive. With a deep sigh, he straightened his shoulders and walked towards the two women, his imposing presence making its way through the curious guests. "Maria, dear," he said softly as he approached, "I see you and Miss Johnson are getting on well." Maria smiled at her husband, her eyes shining with a mixture of affection and complicity. "Charles, Alana here is an extraordinary pianist. You should have heard her play." Charles turned his gaze to Alana, and for a moment the young woman felt as if she were being examined to the depths of her soul. There was something familiar in that look, something that made her feel a strange connection with this man she barely knew. "Actually," Charles said, his voice firm but gentle, "I heard you play, and I must say, Miss Johnson, that your talent is truly remarkable." Alana blushed at the compliment, but before she could reply, Charles continued, "There's something I need to share with all of you," he announced, his voice rising high enough to be heard by everyone in the room. The buzz of conversation ceased immediately, all eyes on the powerful tycoon. Charles placed a hand gently on Alana's shoulder, a gesture that surprised everyone, including Alana herself. "This talented young woman," he began, "Alana Johnson, is not just a guest at this party. She's my granddaughter." The silence that followed was deafening. Alana felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. She looked at Charles, then at Maria, searching for some sign that this was an elaborate joke. But Maria's eyes were filled with tears of emotion, and Charles's face displayed a mixture of pride and regret. "I know this comes as a surprise to many of you," Charles continued, his voice now charged with emotion. "And I know it's an even bigger surprise for you, Alana. I apologize for keeping it a secret for so long." The guests began to murmur amongst themselves, some shocked, others clearly uncomfortable with the revelation. Alana could hear fragments of conversations around her. "How is that possible? She looks nothing like him. That explains why she was invited." Charles raised his hand, silencing everyone again. "I know many of you have questions, and they will all be answered in due course. But what I want you all to understand now is this. Alana is my granddaughter, my blood, and she deserves all the respect and consideration you would give to any member of the Whitman family." He turned to Alana, his eyes now teary. "Alana, I know this comes as a shock to you. I've made a lot of mistakes in the past. Walking away from you and your mother was the biggest one. But I hope we can start to put that right now." Alana was stunned, her emotions oscillating between shock, confusion, and a strange sense of relief. All her life she had wondered about her origins, about the father she had never met. And now, suddenly, not only did she have a grandfather, but that grandfather was one of the most powerful men in New York. Braden, who was watching everything from afar, quickly approached Alana, placing himself protectively at her side. "Alana," he whispered, "are you all right?" She nodded mechanically, still unable to form words. Maria, sensing the young woman's state of shock, intervened gently. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation in a more private place," she suggested, casting a meaningful glance at Charles. Charles agreed, but before they could move, a sharp voice rose from the crowd. "This is ridiculous. Do you really expect us to believe this farce?" Everyone turned to see Rebecca Davis, a socialite known for her conservative views, advancing towards the group. Her face was contorted in a mixture of disbelief and disdain. "Charles," she said, her voice laced with venom, "you can't be serious. This girl can't be your granddaughter. Look at her." The room grew tense, everyone waiting to see how Charles would react. To the surprise of many, it was Maria who stepped forward, her eyes sparking with restrained anger. "Rebecca," she said, her voice calm but sharp as steel, "I suggest you think very carefully before you continue. What exactly are you implying?" Rebecca hesitated for a moment, but her prejudice spoke louder than her common sense. "Come on, Maria, it's obvious. Look at her color. How could she be—" Her words were interrupted by an unexpected sound: laughter. Everyone turned to see Rebecca's children, James and Emily, approaching the group. "Mom," James said, shaking his head with a mixture of amusement and disappointment, "you really haven't learned anything in the last few years, have you?" Emily, the youngest, added, "You know, Mom, there are such things as genetics and diversity. Maybe it's time you expanded your horizons a bit." Rebecca was stunned, looking at her children as if seeing them for the first time. "James, Emily, what are you doing?" "What we should have done a long time ago," James replied. He turned to Alana and held out his hand. "Miss Johnson, it's a pleasure to meet you. Your performance was incredible." Emily followed her brother's example, smiling warmly at Alana. "Welcome to the family, Alana. I hope we can get to know each other better." The young Davises' gesture seemed to break the ice in the room. Gradually, other guests began to approach, some offering hesitant congratulations, others clearly curious to know more about this new addition to the Whitman family. Charles, watching the situation unfold, decided to take control again. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I know you all have many questions. I promise that they will all be answered soon. For now, I ask that you respect the privacy of Alana and our family while we adjust to this new reality." As Charles spoke, Alana felt a gentle hand on her arm. It was Jordan Miller, a young businessman she had noticed watching her throughout the night. "Miss Johnson," he said softly, "or should I say, Miss Whitman, I would like to express my admiration not only for your musical talent, but also for the grace with which you are handling this unexpected situation." Alana looked at Jordan, uncertain of his intentions. Before she could reply, Braden stepped between them, his gaze suspicious. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Miller," Braden said, his voice firm. "I'm sure Alana appreciates the gesture." Jordan pulled back slightly, but his smile didn't falter. Of course. I just wanted to offer my support. Times like these can be challenging." As the evening progressed, Alana found herself at the center of a whirlwind of emotions and revelations. Her life had changed completely in a matter of hours. Looking around, she saw faces that once despised her now smiling eagerly at her, seeking her approval. In the midst of the chaos, her eyes met Charles. At that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. There was much to be said, much to be explained. But for now, Alana knew she was no longer alone. For better or worse, she was now part of something bigger. The party continued around her, but for Alana Johnson, or was it Alana Whitman, the real drama was just beginning. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, once a scene of elegance and decorum, was now buzzing with an almost palpable energy. Charles Whitman's revelation that Alana was his granddaughter had sent shockwaves through New York high society, transforming the atmosphere of the party into something more like the eye of a hurricane, a moment of apparent calm, but charged with tension about to explode. Rebecca Davis, still stunned by the intervention of her own children, retreated to a corner of the room, her face a mask of contained fury. Her eyes, however, did not leave Alana, following her every move with a mixture of contempt and barely concealed curiosity. Alana, for her part, felt like she was on center stage, under a relentless spotlight. Her every gesture, every expression, was observed and analyzed by those present. She could feel the weight of the stares, some curious, others envious, and some even openly hostile. Braden, always attentive, remained by Alana's side, a comforting presence in the midst of the chaos. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, his concern evident. "We can get out of here if you want." Alana shook her head, taking a deep breath to calm herself. "No," she replied, her voice low but firm. "I need to face this. Running away now would only give them more to talk about." Just then, Jordan Miller approached again, his charming smile contrasting with the tension around him. "Miss Johnson, or should I say, Miss Whitman, I'd like to offer my sincere congratulations. It's quite a turnaround, isn't it?" Before Alana could reply, Braden stepped forward, placing himself subtly between her and Jordan. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice polite but with an edge of steel, "perhaps this isn't the best time for professional approaches." Jordan raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, but his eyes sparkled with a mixture of amusement and interest. Of course. I just wanted to express my admiration. Alana, when you're ready to discuss future opportunities, I'd be happy to talk." As Jordan walked away, Alana felt a wave of gratitude for Braden. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I'd do without you here." Braden smiled, but there was a shadow in his eyes. "I'll always be here for you, Alana, but things are going to change now. You know that, don't you?" Before Alana could answer, Charles and Maria Whitman approached. Charles's face was marked by lines of worry and guilt, while Maria displayed a mixture of tenderness and determination. "Alana," Charles began, his voice hoarse with emotion, "I know this is all a shock to you. There's so much I need to explain, so much I owe to you and to the memory of your mother." At the mention of her mother, Alana felt a pang in her heart. Sarah Johnson had died just 2 years before, taking with her secrets that were now beginning to surface. "Why?" Alana asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Why wait until now to tell me?" Charles closed his eyes for a moment as if gathering his strength. "Fear," he finally admitted. "Fear and shame. When I met your grandmother, Alana, I was a different man, younger, more impulsive, and, unfortunately, more foolish." Maria placed a comforting hand on her husband's arm, encouraging him to continue. Charles took a deep breath and continued. "Your grandmother was an extraordinary woman, talented, passionate, full of life, but our relationship was complicated. When she got pregnant, I panicked. I offered money, I offered financial support, but I refused to publicly acknowledge our daughter. Her mother—" Alana felt tears welling up in her eyes, a mixture of anger and sadness threatening to spill over. "My mother grew up without a father because of you," she said, her voice heavy with emotion. Charles nodded, guilt evident in every line of his face. "Yes, and it's something I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. When I finally plucked up the courage to look for them, years later, your mother refused to see me. She had every right, of course." Maria intervened gently. "Alana, dear, I know this is a lot to process, but Charles has been trying to right his wrongs for years. When we heard about you, about your talent—" "You invited me to this party," Alana concluded, the pieces falling into place in her mind. "Was all this planned?" Charles shook his head. Not exactly. We wanted to meet you, yes, but the revelation, that wasn't in the plans. When I saw her play, when I saw the strength and grace with which she faced the prejudice in this room, I couldn't hide any longer. As the conversation unfolded, the rest of the room watched with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. Rebecca Davis, in particular, seemed to be on the verge of an explosion. Her children, James and Emily, tried to calm her down, but their words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Finally, unable to contain herself any longer, Rebecca advanced towards the group. "This is absurd," she exclaimed, her shrill voice cutting through the air. "Charles, you can't be serious. This girl appears out of nowhere, and you declare her your heir? It's an insult to everything our society stands for." The silence that followed was deafening. All eyes turned to Charles, waiting for his reaction. To everyone's surprise, it was Alana who stepped forward, facing Rebecca with a calm that surprised even herself. "Mrs. Davis," Alana said, her voice firm and clear, "I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't come here seeking an inheritance or a title. I came to play the piano, to share my music. If Mr. Whitman says I'm his granddaughter, I believe him. But that doesn't change who I am or where I came from." James and Emily, Rebecca's children, exchanged admiring glances. Emily stepped forward to stand next to Alana. "She's right, Mom," said the young woman. "What matters is a person's character, not their lineage or the color of their skin." Rebecca recoiled, shocked at the betrayal of her own children. Her face contorted in a mixture of anger and confusion. "You don't understand," she hissed. "This will change everything. Our traditions, our way of life." "Maybe it's time for some changes, Rebecca," Charles interjected, his voice calm but firm. "The world is evolving. If we don't evolve with it, we'll be left behind." The room erupted in murmurs, some of approval, others of shock. Alana felt the weight of the moment, aware that her life would never be the same again. She looked at Braden, seeking comfort in her longtime friend. Braden smiled at her, but there was a shadow in his eyes. "You'll be fine, Alana," he said softly. "But remember who you are, where you came from. Don't let this new world change the essence of what makes you special." As the night progressed, Alana found herself at the center of a whirlwind of emotions and expectations. The future, once so uncertain, now opened up before her like a blank book, full of possibilities and challenges. Charles and Maria remained by her side, offering silent support. Jordan Miller watched from afar, his calculating eyes assessing the new possibilities that lay ahead. And Rebecca Davis, defeated but not subdued, withdrew from the party, swearing to herself that it wouldn't stay that way. In the midst of the chaos, Alana closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the notes of the piano, the purity of the music that had always been her refuge. She knew that, no matter what the future held, music would be her anchor, her unchanging truth in a world that had just been turned upside down. The evening progressed, and the initial glamour of the gala party at the Plaza Hotel had turned into something more complex and tense. The ballroom, once a sea of elegant laughter and superficial conversation, was now buzzing with whispers and furtive glances. Charles Whitman's revelation that Alana was his granddaughter had shaken the foundations of that world of privilege and appearances. Alana, at the center of this maelstrom, felt as if she were living a bizarre dream. Just a few hours ago, she was a young pianist struggling to be recognized. Now, suddenly, she was the heiress of one of the most powerful men in New York. The weight of this reality began to settle on her shoulders, as heavy as the gaze of the guests surrounding her. Seeking a moment of peace, Alana discreetly moved away from the main group, finding refuge on a balcony that offered a breathtaking view of the city. New York sparkled outside, a sea of light and possibilities. She took a deep breath, letting the cool night air calm her nerves. "It's quite a view, isn't it?" Maria Whitman's soft voice surprised her. The older woman joined Alana on the balcony, her compassionate gaze studying the young woman's face. "Sometimes, when the world inside gets too much, I come here to remind myself that there's a whole universe beyond these walls." Alana nodded, grateful for Maria's comforting presence. "Everything has changed so fast," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yesterday, I was just me. Today, I'm a Whitman. I don't know if I'm ready for that." Maria smiled gently, placing a hand on Alana's shoulder. "Honey, you're still you. A name, a title. They don't define who you are deep down. What defines you are your choices, your actions." While they were talking, inside the salon, Charles Whitman was facing his own whirlwind of emotions and consequences. Jordan Miller, the young and ambitious businessman, had finally gotten a moment alone with the tycoon. "Mr. Whitman," Jordan began, his charming smile masking the cunning in his eyes, "I must say that I am impressed by your courage tonight. Revealing a previously unknown granddaughter, that's a bold move." Charles studied the young man with a penetrating gaze. "Mr. Miller, I have a feeling you didn't come all this way just to flatter me. What do you really want?" Jordan laughed softly, admiring the older man's wit. "Straight to the point, as always. Well, Mr. Whitman, I'm here to propose a partnership, one that could benefit not only our companies, but also your newly discovered granddaughter." Charles raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "Go on." "Imagine," Jordan elaborated, his eyes shining with enthusiasm, "a merger between Whitman Industries and Miller Enterprises. With our combined resources, we could not only dominate the market, but also create a platform for Alana. Think of the possibilities. Benefit concerts, music education programs for underprivileged communities. It would be a perfect way to introduce Alana to the world of business and philanthropy." Charles listened attentively, his face a mask of neutrality. Years of negotiations had taught him never to reveal his cards too soon. "An interesting proposal, Mr. Miller. But tell me, what's in it for you? Apart from the obvious financial benefits, of course." Jordan hesitated for a moment, as if pondering how much to reveal. "Honesty, then. I admire Alana, Mr. Whitman, not just for her talent, but for her strength of character. I believe that together we could do incredible things." Charles nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the young man's face. "I see. Well, Mr. Miller, your proposal certainly deserves consideration, but understand this. Alana is not a pawn in a corporate chess game. Any decision about her future will be hers and hers alone." As this conversation unfolded, Braden watched from afar, his concern growing with each passing moment. He had known Alana for years, knew of her struggles, her dreams. Seeing her now, at the center of this world of wealth and power, aroused conflicting feelings in him. Rebecca Davis, still furious about the night's events, approached Braden with a fake smile. "It's hard, isn't it?" she said, her voice laden with false sympathy. "To see someone you've known for so long elevated to a status you'll never achieve." Braden turned to face her, his eyes cold. "Miss Davis, I don't think you know me well enough to make assumptions about my feelings." Rebecca laughed, a humorless sound. "Oh dear, I don't need to know you to see the truth. Do you think Alana will still look up to you now that she's a Whitman? She belongs to a different world now." Rebecca's words, although cruel, touched on insecurities that Braden struggled to ignore. He watched Alana on the balcony with Maria, looking so distant and unreachable. Meanwhile, on the balcony, Alana and Maria continued their conversation, oblivious to the dramas unfolding inside the salon. "Alana," Maria said softly, "I know all this is overwhelming, but I want you to know that you're not alone. Charles and I are here for you, not to dictate your future, but to support you on whatever path you choose." Alana felt tears forming in her eyes. "It's all so confusing," she admitted. "Part of me wants to embrace this new life, all these opportunities. But another part is afraid of losing who I am." Maria smiled tenderly. "Darling, who you are is not defined by your name or your bank account. It's defined by your heart, by your actions. You are the same Alana who walked into this hall tonight and played that piano with such passion. That will never change." Maria's words brought a comfort that Alana didn't know she needed. She looked out at the city again, the lights now seeming less intimidating and more like an invitation. "What happens now?" Alana asked, her voice a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. Maria shrugged slightly. "That, my dear, is entirely up to you. But remember, you have a force within you that is more powerful than any name or fortune. Use it wisely." While the two women shared this moment of mutual understanding, inside the salon, the gears of power and ambition continued to turn. Jordan Miller planned his next move, Rebecca Davis ruminated on her revenge, and Braden struggled with her own insecurities. Charles Whitman, watching it all, knew that the night was far from over. The revelations and confrontations so far were only the beginning. The real test for Alana, and for all of them, was yet to come. As the night progressed, the Plaza Hotel became a microcosm of human emotions: ambition, fear, love, resentment, hope. And at the center of it all was Alana, a young woman on the verge of a transformation that would change not only her life, but the lives of everyone around her. The air was full of possibilities and dangers, promises, and threats. The stage was set for the next act of this drama, an act that would test Alana's strength of character and set the course for her future. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, once the scene of glamour and frivolity, now pulsed with a dense, charged energy. The night's revelations had shaken the structures of that world of appearances, exposing weaknesses and long-buried secrets. Rebecca Davis, still seething with anger and humiliation, watched the room with eagle eyes. Her face, normally a mask of social composure, now betrayed a bitterness that not even the most expensive cosmetics could hide. She saw her chance when she noticed Alana returning alone from the balcony, looking vulnerable and lost amidst the whirlwind of events. With determined steps, Rebecca approached the young woman, a fake smile painted on her lips. "Alana, darling," she began, her voice as sweet as poison, "it must be so exciting for you, isn't it, to find yourself part of such an illustrious family?" Alana, taken by surprise, stammered a reply, but Rebecca continued, implacable. "Of course, it must be a bit intimidating too. After all, you weren't brought up in this world. There are so many rules, so many expectations." Rebecca's words, although spoken with false sympathy, were like little stabs, each one designed to plant doubts and insecurities in Alana's heart. The young pianist felt the weight of the other guest's gaze, suddenly aware of her every gesture, every word. But before Rebecca could continue her veiled attack, a firm, clear voice cut through the air. "Mom, that's enough." Emily Davis, Rebecca's youngest daughter, appeared at Alana's side, her eyes blazing with indignation. "What you're doing is cruel and unnecessary." Rebecca turned to her daughter, shock and anger competing on her face. "Emily, you don't understand. I'm just—" "No, Mom," Emily interrupted her, her voice trembling slightly but firm. "I understand perfectly. I understand that you're afraid of change, afraid of losing your status, your control. The room fell silent, all eyes on the confrontation between mother and daughter. James, Rebecca's eldest son, joined his sister, placing a comforting hand on Emily's shoulder. "Emily's right, Mom," he said softly. "What you're doing isn't who you really are, or at least it's not who you used to be." Rebecca looked at her children, a mixture of confusion and hurt in her eyes. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Everything is changing. This world, our world." "Maybe it's time for a change, Mrs. Davis," Charles Whitman's calm voice rang out. He approached the group, his eyes gentle but determined. "The world out there is evolving. If we cling to old prejudices and fears, we will be left behind." Alana, who until then had been watching the scene in silence, stepped forward. Her voice, although soft, carried a strength that surprised everyone, including herself. "Mrs. Davis, I understand your fear. Believe me, I'm just as scared as you are. Everything I know, everything I am, seems to be changing. But maybe this change is an opportunity for all of us." Alana's words seemed to touch something deep within Rebecca. For a moment, the mask of arrogance fell away, revealing a vulnerable and insecure woman. I don't know how to deal with this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily and James hugged their mother, a gesture of love and understanding that spoke louder than any words. The previously tense hall seemed to exhale a collective sigh of relief. As this scene unfolded, Braden watched from afar, his heart a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He was proud of Alana, of her strength and compassion, but he also felt a growing fear of losing her to this new world to which she now belonged. Jordan Miller, always on the lookout for opportunities, saw his chance. Approaching Braden, he offered an understanding smile. "It's hard, isn't it? Seeing someone you love elevated to a level that seems unattainable." Braden turned, surprised by the approach. "You don't know anything about me or Alana," he replied, his voice tense. Jordan held up his hands in a conciliatory gesture. "Calm down, buddy. I'm not here to judge. In fact, I'm here to offer you an opportunity." "What kind of opportunity?" Braden asked, his curiosity overcoming his mistrust. "One that could put you on the same level as Alana," Jordan explained, his eyes shining with unspoken promise. "I have connections in the music world, Braden. I can open doors you didn't even know existed." Jordan's words were tempting, offering Braden a chance not to be left behind as Alana rose to new heights. But there was something about the offer that made him uncomfortable, a feeling that accepting would mean compromising something fundamental about himself. As Braden wrestled with this decision, Charles Whitman watched the scene with watchful eyes. He recognized the game Jordan was playing, the subtle manipulations, the veiled promises. It was a game he himself had played many times throughout his career. Deciding it was time to intervene, Charles approached Braden and Jordan. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice calm but authoritative, "I think this conversation can wait for a more appropriate time. Tonight is about family, about new beginnings." Jordan stepped back, recognizing the warning in Charles's words. With a polite smile, he walked away, leaving Braden and Charles alone. "Braden," Charles said softly, "I know the look I saw in your eyes. It's the same one I used to see in the mirror many years ago. The fear of losing something precious, the temptation to do anything to keep it." Braden looked at the older man, surprised by the insightfulness of his words. I just want what's best for Alana," he admitted. Charles smiled gently. "And that's why I trust you, Braden. You care about her, truly. Don't let fear or ambition cloud that love." Charles's words struck Braden deeply. He looked at Alana, who was now chatting animatedly with Emily and James, her face lit up with a genuine smile. At that moment, Braden understood that his role was not to compete with Alana's new world, but to be an anchor, a reminder of who she really was. The evening progressed, and with it, a sense of transformation hung in the air. Rebecca Davis, still shaken but visibly calmer, talked quietly to her children. Jordan Miller watched the scene from afar, his mind already working on new plans and strategies. Alana, at the center of it all, felt like she was in the eye of a hurricane. Everything around her had changed, but deep down she knew that her essence remained the same. She was Alana Johnson, the talented pianist who had entered that hall hours ago. Now she was also Alana Whitman, heiress to an empire. But above all, she was simply Alana, a young woman on the verge of an extraordinary journey. As the party began to dissipate, with guests saying goodbye and promises of future meetings being exchanged, Alana found herself on the balcony again, looking out over the city that never sleeps. New York sparkled outside, a world of endless possibilities. "Are you ready for what comes next?" Maria Whitman's voice surprised her. Alana turned, meeting the gentle gaze of her newfound grandmother. With a hesitant but hopeful smile, she replied, "I'm not sure I'm ready, but I'm looking forward to finding out." The two women stood there, side by side, looking at the future that was opening up before them. The night had only just begun. The real challenge, the real journey, had only just begun. The rising sun was casting its first rays over New York City, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. At the Plaza Hotel, the last guests of the gala party were saying goodbye, leaving behind a hall that had witnessed a night of revelations, confrontations, and, finally, transformations. Alana Johnson, or would she be Alana Whitman now, watched the city awaken from the hotel balcony, her eyes tired but bright with new determination. The last few hours had been a roller coaster of emotions, changing the course of her life in ways she was barely beginning to comprehend. "It's a breathtaking view, isn't it?" Charles Whitman's soft voice surprised her. Her newfound grandfather joined her on the balcony, his eyes reflecting a mixture of regret and hope. Alana nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "It's like the city is waking up with me to a new life." Charles laughed softly. "An apt analogy, my dear. You're on the verge of a new chapter, just as this city is always reinventing itself." For a moment, grandfather and granddaughter were silent, absorbing the magnitude of the moment. It was Alana who finally broke the silence, her voice laden with restrained emotion. "Why now?" she asked, turning to face Charles. "Why wait so long to recognize me?" Charles closed his eyes, the pain evident in every line of his face. "Fear," he admitted, "fear and shame. When I met your grandmother, I was a different man, younger, more foolish, and unfortunately, more concerned with appearances than with what really mattered." He paused, gathering the courage to continue. "When your mother was born, I panicked. I offered financial support, but refused to acknowledge it publicly. It was the biggest mistake of my life, and one I've regretted every day since." Alana felt tears forming in her eyes, a mixture of anger and compassion fighting inside her. "My mother grew up without a father because of you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Charles nodded, guilt evident in his eyes. "Yes, and it's something I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. When I finally plucked up the courage to look for them, years later, your mother refused to see me. She had every right, of course." He turned to Alana, his eyes pleading for understanding. "But when I heard about you, about your talent, I couldn't make the same mistake twice. I wanted to get to know you, Alana. I wanted the chance to do things right this time." Alana absorbed his words, feeling the weight of generations of pain and regret. She thought of her mother, of everything she had sacrificed, of all the struggles she had faced alone. But she also thought of the man in front of her, a man who was trying to right the wrongs of the past. "It won't be easy," she finally said. "There's a lot to overcome, a lot to heal." Charles nodded, a small smile of gratitude on his lips. "I know, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Alana. Not to erase the past, but to build a better future." As they talked, Maria Whitman joined them on the balcony, bringing with her an aura of calm and understanding. "Breakfast is served," she announced softly. "I thought we could all use a little sustenance after such a long night." The three of them made their way to a private room, where a table was set with a variety of delicious dishes. To Alana's surprise, Braden was already there, looking a little out of place but determined. "Braden!" Alana exclaimed, a genuine smile lighting up her face. "You stayed?" Braden nodded, a shy smile on his lips. "I couldn't leave without making sure you were okay." Charles watched the interaction between the two young men with interest. "Braden," he said, holding out his hand, "I'd like to thank you for your support for Alana. It's obvious how much you care about her." Braden shook Charles's hand, a little surprised by the cordiality. "Alana she's special," he said simply. "Her talent, her strength. She deserves every opportunity in the world." As they sat down to breakfast, the conversation flowed naturally, covering topics from Alana's musical future to the challenges they would face, integrating two such different worlds. "You know," Maria said, looking fondly at Alana, "your music can be a powerful bridge, a way of bringing people together, of breaking down barriers." Alana considered her grandmother's words, an idea beginning to form in her mind. "What if," she began hesitantly, "what if we use that? The influence of the Whitman family, combined with my music, we could make a real difference to people's lives." Charles leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you have in mind, dear?" "A music education program," Alana explained, her enthusiasm growing, "for children from underprivileged communities, to give them the opportunity I had, the chance to find their voice through music." Braden smiled, proud to see Alana embracing her new role so selflessly. "It's an incredible idea, Alana, and I'd love to help if you'll let me." Charles and Maria exchanged looks of approval. "I think it's a wonderful idea," Charles said, "and I'm sure we can mobilize resources and contacts to make it a reality." As they discussed the details of the project, Alana felt a wave of gratitude and purpose wash over her. She was finding a way to honor her roots, to use her new status to make a real difference in the world. The hours passed quickly, and soon the afternoon sun was bathing the city outside. Alana found herself on the balcony again, this time accompanied by Braden. "So," he said softly, "how are you feeling about all this?" Alana took a deep breath, considering the question. "It's scary," she admitted. "Everything has changed so quickly, but it's also exciting. I feel like I can do something really meaningful now." Braden smiled, placing a hand gently on hers. "You've always been capable of incredible things, Alana. Now the world will finally see what I've always known." Alana looked at her friend, feeling a wave of affection and gratitude. "Thank you, Braden, for being here, for believing in me. I don't know what I'd do without you." For a moment, they were both silent, the unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, Braden spoke. "You know I'll always be here for you, Alana, no matter what happens, no matter where this new path takes you." Alana nodded, tears of gratitude shining in her eyes. She knew the challenges she would face would be many, but with the support of her new family and Braden's unwavering loyalty, she felt ready to face them. As the afternoon progressed, the Whitmans and Braden made plans for the coming days. There would be a lot to do: official announcements, legal arrangements, and the first steps for Alana's music education program. When it was finally time to leave the hotel, Alana took one last look at the ballroom, now empty and silent. So many things had changed in that space in just one night. She was no longer just Alana Johnson, the young pianist struggling to be recognized. She was Alana Whitman, heiress to an empire. But more importantly, she was a young woman with a purpose and a vision for the future. As she walked out of the Plaza Hotel, Alana felt the New York sun on her face, a gentle breeze caressing her skin. The city seemed different now, full of possibilities and promise. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy, that there would be obstacles and challenges to overcome. But for the first time in a long time, Alana felt truly hopeful. With Braden by her side and her new family a few steps behind, Alana took her first steps towards this new future. The music in her heart was stronger than ever, a symphony of hope, forgiveness, and endless possibilities. And as New York stretched out before her, vast and full of life, Alana knew that this was just the first note of a beautiful and powerful composition that had only just begun. The future, with all its uncertainties and promises, awaited, and Alana Johnson Whitman was ready to face it, one note at a time. If you enjoyed this story, I invite you to like and subscribe to my channel. Your support motivates me to keep sharing exciting stories nearly every day. Don't miss the next amazing story that's about to unfold on your screen. I greatly appreciate your backing. Hope to see you soon.